Gay, Gordon and Pope can't go along with England to the international window. Gay can't even walk. He's got a bruised foot. Pope had concussion, which is a real shame for him because it was his first call-up in almost a year. Gordon missed the game on Sunday with an injury away at Brentford. But I suppose the big headline here is, Henry, is that with Gordon out, it means Rashford has a real chance now, especially bearing in mind his form for Barcelona, to nail down that left-hand side.
Yeah, all those assists he got for them the other night. He's obviously settled in quickly. There was never any chance of him going back to Manchester United to play. So it's going to be interesting to see whether they make the move to make it permanent in January or whether they wait until the end of the season. So yeah, it's a good point, and particularly with Harry Kane being effectively irreplaceable, we have to look at who are going to be the understudies in the middle, particularly no Ollie Watkins in the squad. So Rashford just becomes even more important, understudy to Gordon for the World Cup, but obviously going to be starting in one of these games with no Gordon, but also as an understudy to Harry Kane centrally.
Yeah, and also there was a little bit of discussion that maybe Phil Foden could play that role. In the build-up to the game when he announced his squad, he made loads of comments, actually, and we'll get into them in more detail, about each player being pitted against one another in terms of, I've given you the clarity of telling you where you're going to play, and it's your job to try and force your way past another person. When he was asked about Phil Foden and what his position was, he sort of said he's the exception to the rule. He can be a number 10 or 10 and a half, or he could be a 9 or 9 and a half, and maybe he will replace Kane for this game. And in fact, at some point over this international break, I think we are, Crook, going to see Phil Foden play as England's sort of false 9.
Yeah, that's certainly the information that I have. Will it be in this first game against the Serbia side they thrashed away from home, or will it be away in Albania? Probably the former, I would have thought. But yeah, Harry Kane isn't going to play 90 minutes in both games. He'd probably want to obviously add to his England goal haul. But I think Thomas Tuchel's got to be sensible, not just for England, but for Bayern Munich and Vincent Kompany as well. I think he'd be furious if Harry Kane completed both 90 minutes. So there isn't really another option, is there? Rashford could play through the middle, but as Henry's alluded to, I think he sees him as that wide left player. And Foden doesn't really have a position, which is a tricky one actually for him, because if you're picking your sort of front five, we're expecting England to go 4-1, 4-1 at the World Cup. I think it's pretty much set in stone, isn't it? That Harry Kane obviously leads the line, Marcus Rashford or Anthony Gordon play on one side, Saka starts on the other, and then probably Bellingham and Rice in the middle. So where does Phil Foden fit in?
Well, we will find out over the next couple of games, and it may be a last opportunity for Phil Foden to see if he can fit into the structure of the team. And the reason I say that is because there was a brilliant interview with Anthony Barry this week, one of the papers in which, I think it was within the Telegraph, in which he talked about the 360-degree analysis and profiling of the players that they do. Now, obviously, all big nations do this, and all big clubs do this, right? They look at the way that players interact with one another. And one of the key facets of the interview, I thought, was that he discussed that sometimes they don't necessarily profile players on their individuality. They profile players on how they interact with others and how this person's ego and psychology affects another person's ego and psychology, and then how that person reacts to other people's egos and psychologies. And actually, Henry, one of the things that we've noticed over the last couple of years is that Phil Foden doesn't really react brilliantly to other big personalities in the team that are taking up some of his oxygen and space. So he's got to find a way of being able to deal with that and be able to perform.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't exactly struggled around big personalities and big players at Manchester City over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, he's got, 5, 6 Premier League titles and a Champions League. I've got huge sympathy with Phil Foden for England because in his last 3 starts, he's played under 3 different managers, Southgate, Carsley and Tuchel, and played in 3 different positions. He's played wide right, he's played loosely off the left under Southgate, and he's played centrally as well. I don't think England have certainly not seen the Manchester City Phil Foden, but honestly, particularly with the way that Crook is lined up England, whether it's 4-1-4-1 or 4-2-3-1, I'll definitely have Anderson in there. I don't see how there is a space for Phil Foden or actually a Morgan Rogers or a Cole Palmer. or any of these fantastic number 10s we've got if you are going to start with Bellingham. And Sam, your point was really pertinent, and I was slightly surprised when Tuchel the other day at Wembley came out and literally, if you can with numbers, he numbered the players, and he said Bellingham is a number 10, Harry Kane is a number 9. So those two, they are going to be effectively your strikers, split strikers, call them what you want. I just don't see how Foden, fabulous talent though he is, actually gets in England's starting lineup.
Yeah, it's not just Foden though, is it? As you've already said, it's Morgan Rogers, it's Eberici Eze, it's Cole Palmer, it's Phil Foden. It's this litany of great players that are available to England that you can't get into the starting 11 all at the same time if you're going to play, as we expect them to do now, this 4-1-4-1 formation. Now that means that either someone's got to be adaptive and come up with a different position, or it means that actually now they've identified where they're playing, you're going to end up with some big casualties when it comes to the World Cup squad, and there's some big name players that are going to miss out, and it is going to rely on that personality trait, that sort of, do I fit in with the group? Do I become a good tourist? Do I supplement Jude Bellingham in a sort of, I don't know, personality sense? Because Bellingham is a big personality, and you need someone who's going to be behind him, who's going to push him in terms of ability, but not necessarily sort of, I don't know, take umbrage when they're not in the starting 11, Crook.
Yeah, agreed. And Thomas Tuchel's got to succeed where previous England managers have failed, really, even as recently as Gareth Southgate at the last Euros, as Henry's been talking about, by shoehorning Phil Foden in particular into the team in a position that he clearly isn't comfortable. It had a detrimental effect on performances. And then you go back to the golden generation, obviously the Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes conundrum. Paul Scholes was very much the victim of that. And in the end decided, you know what, I'm not a left winger. I don't fancy playing for England anymore. So I think Tuchel will be brave. I think the most pertinent quote we've heard from him so far is that his job is to pick the best team, not necessarily the best players. So I don't think he'll be intimidated by leaving out those big personalities and those big players that Henry's mentioned.
And Henry, you've been speaking to him this week. You've not had a one or two cross words about ego, because he's got a big ego as well.
Yeah, I said to him, isn't he in a way the sort of coaching version of Jude Bellingham? I mean, he's an elite coach, just as Bellingham's an elite player. He is highly demanding of individuals. He can fall out with people, but I'm slightly suspect about this narrative that Bellingham's going into the dressing room and just intimidating everyone with his personality. Look, he plays for Real Madrid. He hangs around with Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. He's one of the best players in the world. We've seen it. He's the reigning England Player of the Year, voted for by the fans. So he's clearly an individual of substance. He was made one of the 4 captains, vice captains as they were, in the leadership group under Gareth Southgate. So clearly he's got that 360 good tourist element, call it what you like. But I'm sorry, I've been to so many tournaments with England when they've actually looked inhibited. We want players who've got this will to win. We want players who will actually look around the dressing room and be demanding of players. I mean, Crookie knows Manchester United well, but Manchester United have been at their best when they've had a Brian Robson, when they've had a Roy Keane, when they've had Gary Neville in a different way, demanding high standards of others. And if Bellingham, I don't like Bellingham's descent towards officials, and I'm with Mrs. Tuchel on that. But in terms of actually demanding at the very elite level, if Bellingham was American, everyone would go, why can't we create players with this sort of winning mindset? So look, he's 22. Maybe he's got to sort of mature and balance it a little bit if other players are intimidated. But look, the meek men inherit the earth, but they're not going to win the World Cup. We're going to need tough Bellingham types out there who are good in clutch moments. Slovakia, key moments when England are about to go out and he pulls something out the bag like that. So look, it's not as if he's a luxury player. He delivers. We saw what a team player he was at Anfield in a very poor Real Madrid performance. Bellingham actually was the one who was tracking back. He was covering for Vinicius. He was actually trying to sort of lead the fight back against, obviously, a very powerful Liverpool performance. And he was the only one who also got a shot on goal as well for Real Madrid. So I'm slightly concerned about this narrative. And I know it's a typical thing with England. We always have someone to put up in the headlines and have a go at. It's been Gaza. It's been Rooney. It's been Beckham for a while, particularly after France '98. Let's not do that with Bellingham. Let's make him feel that he is appreciated appreciated. But of course, he's got to tone down some of the noise at times.
But one of the things that has to happen as well is that you've got to put the right people around him, and that's the point, isn't it? You know, you can embrace that. You need that. You need the leader. You need someone who says, "Do you know what? When the chips are down, I'll take the game by the scruff of the neck and I'll make it happen." But you also need people around him that can supplement the best facets of his personality, the best facets of his game. And when they're selecting the squad, that will come into it. I spoke to Thomas Cup. Well, I think it's probably almost about 6-7 months ago now, when we sat down and we were sort of discussing, and Henry, I think you were at the same thing that I was at, and he was saying, you know, that he will have a core group of players who are going to play the games, and then there'll be others that he knows probably won't get much game time, and their job will be to be brilliant in training every single day and raise the standards of those that are going out there on a day-to-day basis. But also, they're the ones that cannot sulk. They're the ones that cannot bring the team down when it comes to not being selected, when it comes to only getting a handful of minutes at the tournament, Crook.
You're basically talking about Jordan Henderson there, aren't you? That's the main sort of exhibit A. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we were in and around it in Germany. We were aware that maybe the camp wasn't as harmonious as it had been in previous tournaments under Gareth Southgate. I think Thomas Tuchel, done his ring around with senior players that he trusted, was aware of that as well. And that's why Jordan Henderson was called up in the first place. What you have to say is that actually Henderson's form at Brentford this season has more than justified his selection. But yeah, you wouldn't expect him to get too many minutes. You know he's going to be a good tourist, and that is something else that Thomas Tuchel is going to have to take into account. With the goalkeeping department as well, Nick Pope out, looks like James Trafford is going to get the call up. I'm slightly surprised by that because he's not playing for Manchester City. Aaron Ramsdale is at least playing in the Cups for Newcastle and might get a run in the team now with Pope injured. And we know he is a brilliant tourist. He is somebody that if the mood is a little bit low, you can rely upon to lift it.
Especially since he went on your stag do.
Can I just chip in on that? I'm sure there were some good tourists on Crook's stag do. But just on this idea of good tourists, and you've got players who are going out there who will, because of their personalities, will balance the squad. The majority of them will play, leaving aside the goalkeepers, because Jordan Pickford will obviously play. Say it's 7-8 games that England are out there for. Because of the heat, because of the use of substitutions, they might even expand that. FIFA are possible of anything. The majority of them will actually play.
Well, there's 26 men that are going to be in the squad. 3 of those will be goalkeepers. There's 23 outfield players at the moment. But like you say, there is a sort of tentative discussion now. That squad could be 30. That seems a lot for 8 games. But, this is modern football. But with 5 substitutions, possibly 6 in extra time, you're right. There will be a lot of people that play. But even then, you're probably still only going to the well for 18, 19 players over the course of that period, unless you have one of those dead rubber group games where they completely play a second string. But yes, there will be opportunity. But most of the time, and listen, most of the time for all of the players, actually, you're not playing games. You're just in camp. That is the key thing, that you've got to try and stay together. And actually, reading that article with Anthony Barry this week, he said, under Tuchel's leadership, the focus is building Team England, not just a squad, but a brotherhood with an emotional connection and collective energy. And Anthony Barry was sort of stressing that creating the bond, a team culture, where the shirt feels more like a cape than a burden, is what gives England a genuine chance of winning the first World Cup since 1966. He believes that spirit and togetherness, rather than simply recreating club styles or picking the biggest names, will drive the nation's ambition, Henry.
Yeah, but isn't that what Gareth Southgate has done? He has started a journey. He changed the culture. The club cliques went. There was a real camaraderie. All the things that Anthony said in those interviews with the Sunday papers was slightly... I wonder what Southgate would have been thinking, just sort of reading that, was going, well, hang on a sec. We did that. We took the tensions out. We built the camaraderie. You could sense it. Look, we all go to the England sessions, and you saw under Southgate they really enjoyed. Obviously, it was a post-Nice thing, but they all really enjoyed reporting to duty. Southgate went round. Obviously, he knew a lot of them through the under-21s, but he also went round the clubs and built up relations with the managers to actually take the heat out of the shirt, allow them, encourage them to report for duty. So I think what Anthony is saying, you really should have a nod to the work that Southgate's done. Obviously, Tuchel and Anthony Barry are far more sort of elite game changers in terms of the managerial impact they can have from the dugout. But I think a lot of the change in culture is down to Gareth.
But I think the key point that he was trying to make was basically like what we've already said. He's not going to pick the best players. He's going to pick the best team. That's going to be the key sort of selection process. He's trying to make the best team, not necessarily just the most skillful players. I think he went on to say something like, if you're building a band, you don't get 11 lead singers, do you? And give them one mic, which I thought was quite a good analogy, actually. He actually was quite a few sound bites in that interview with Anthony Barry. It was almost like he might have thought about it beforehand. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about some of the others that have made it into the squad. Adam Wharton called up too. Tuchel clear that he has been keen to call him up for some time. Yeah, I think that sort of came after the Senegal game where they really lacked control in the middle of the park, and he thought, I've got to adapt this. I need a proper number 6, which is why he's now stumbled upon Anderson, who might not play in these 2 games because of discomfort that he's feeling. So we should get to see Adam Wharton for the first time, Crook.
Yeah, this is something that we've been clamouring for a while. I know you and I both rate Adam Wharton very highly. I guess his injury issues are a concern. He has missed quite a few games over the course of his Palace career, but he's certainly a very talented player. I guess it will depend on how many players Tuchel does decide that he wants to take in that position, because Anderson, if he's fit, is going to be a shoe-in. Obviously, you've got Declan Rice, I've already mentioned, Jordan Henderson. So I would say at this moment in time, Wharton is probably one of those players who is 50-50 at best to actually make the final cut for the World Cup. So he probably needs a decent international break now and again in March.
But I think by Tuchel's metric and description of where the players play, you've got Wharton, Anderson and Henderson in the 6. They're the 6s that he's considering. I don't think Rice goes into that. I think Rice is the hybrid 8-10 who plays on the left of the 4 the 2 in the middle, the 2 10s in the middle. But I think he's the 8-10 there, and Bellingham's the other one, which is the split striker that plays with Kane. And I think he's pretty clear that he wants Rice to play further up the pitch, which is why he's looking for someone to be that sitter, that playmaker, that tempo dictator, which Wharton could be. But I think you're right. It might be that they decide to go Wharton, Henderson, or Anderson, Henderson, and then have the option of repurposing Rice if they need to further into the tournament, especially if they want to commit extra players on. That change does give you that option as well. Let's talk about some of the players that have been left out. Jack Grealish, Trent Alexander-Arnold, and Danny Welbeck. First of all, Henry, do you want to talk about Trent and Jack, because they were mainstays in this squad for a very long time?
They were, and I mean, you look at Jack Grealish. I mean, he's had a fantastic start to his loan spell at Everton. Sort of dipped a bit, but his issue is, we all know Jack's personality, how good he is, but how does he get in? England have got quality on the left, names that you've mentioned like Gordon and Rashford. Obviously, Eberechi Eze can play. Madueke, when he's fit, can play either side. I just don't. And then as a number 10, it will take us half an hour to list the number of 10s that he's got. So I can't quite see Jack, for how much we love him as an individual, as a player, getting back in. And Trent Alexander-Arnold, I mean, he's a fabulous player, but he had 10 minutes against Rayo Vallecano the other night. Valverde's ahead of him. They've obviously got Carvajal as well. So I mean, I would take Trent Alexander-Arnold, but he's not going to get in ahead of Reece James at the moment. The issue about Reece James and Enzo Maresca, who's taken a bit of stick recently, but he is actually marshalling Reece James's minutes and using him quite shrewdly, because everyone's aware of Reece James's frailties. And then, of course, you've got Tino Livramento to come back, who can play left or right, and probably may start on the left. So, yeah, I mean, there are issues for Trent to get back in that midfield. Just one point about your earlier, you were naming all the sort of 6s. I mean, Alex Scott, I've seen him play 6, 8 and 10. I've seen him play alongside Anderson. I've seen him play slightly ahead of Anderson, like Rice does with Anderson, when Anderson plays more the Zubimendi role in terms of Arsenal. So, yeah, I mean, I think we should always... I'm a huge, supporter of the under-21. So to see them step up, and Alex Scott set up, I've seen him win a trophy with the under-19s, with the under-21s. So it's great to see him in there. I don't think he'll necessarily go to the World Cup, but, the Guernsey Grealish deserves a nod.
Yeah, and also it's great to see that progression from the 21s that has started to happen again, because this is a team that have managed to lift a trophy. They know what it's like to win. So Livramento coming from that group from the summer, Scott coming from that group, Anderson coming from that group. That's what you need in order to sort of try and sort of populate a team with winners. You've got winners elsewhere. Kane's won a Bundesliga, Bellingham's won multiple trophies at Real Madrid. Henderson's won the title with Liverpool. You need that winning culture, that winning mentality. You want to get people who can get you over the line. And I think one of the key things that maybe was a mistake last time at the European Championships is that the squad was too young and too inexperienced, and they didn't have enough of those winners that had got over the line before. At the time, I don't think Kane had got over the line before in terms of winning a major trophy. So Gareth was a little bit short on that experience and that winning mentality, whereas I think Thomas has just gone, well, do you know what? I'm going to re-inject some of that. I'm not going to go just for youth. I'm going to bring in some of that experience to try and add that second star. Serbia first on Thursday night, hammered them away at home, which was supposed to be the hardest game of the group, really, the two matches with Serbia. What do we want to see here from a playing point of view? Because obviously the biggest issue, and we've sort of spoken to him about this, is that these games actually mean nothing in terms of qualification because England have already won the group, Crook.
Yeah, and obviously this is back at Wembley. Thomas Tuchel, after the friendly against Wales, criticised the Wembley crowd for not giving his players enough energy. I'm going to be fascinated to see, not the attendance, because we know that people will turn up and get their caps. I'm fascinated to see how many of them are still left come the start of the second half, because I've got to say this is not a brilliantly appealing fixture on paper, as you say, effectively a dead rubber. England have already qualified. Serbia are not very good, as we saw from the away game. So I think the players are going to have to supply the energy as opposed to the fans. And I hope, and I say this every time we go into an international break, I hope there is something in the team selection that gives us something to cling on to. We don't necessarily need to see Harry Kane. Maybe we do need to see Phil Foden as a false number 9 to give us a bit of a takeaway and a talking point. Maybe we do need to see Adam Wharton in that number 6 position. Maybe we do need to see a change at the back. This is an opportunity to experiment. Yes, he doesn't want to lose the game, but it's not life or death, is it?
And they have a great DJ at the stadium, Wembley Stadium. They employ all of the sort of the pyrotechnics and the light shows now to try and get everybody in. Do you think you just keep playing E17s, stay now, all the way through the game, just to try and encourage? I know it's a bit early for Christmas songs, but just
Never
trying
too
to make
early for
people
that,
stay to the end. just get maybe halftime show should be E17s.
Yeah, or a bit of Reece James, sit down.
Yes, sit down. Very good.